I'm so accustomed to listening to our podcast episodes that now when we start to record one, I automatically play the music in my head. So just when you said start recording, I went do 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 do.
The music, by the way, is from the SpongeBob Game Boy game that we used to play all the time.
That's a copyright
That is,
violation.
who cares? Nobody cares.
I never finished that final level of that SpongeBob game.
I never finished it either.
Anyway, hi Eric.
Hi,
Welcome to, I don't even know what episode we're on anymore. Is it 17, 18?
it's 18.
18, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay, that's amazing. Considering that we've been at this for less than 1 year, it is amazing that we have such a full back catalog of podcast episodes.
yeah. We put in the
Um,
work.
yes. So today we are back on our bullshit, as they say, but we're back to action adventure movies. Although, if you think about it, this was very much an action movie, but this was more of a romantic comedy than
This
the
is way more
our
of
previous
yeah.
episode. Yeah, it was much more of a romantic comedy than our previous episode, which was about something that we thought was a romantic comedy, but was actually a romantic drama. So this one has a lot of action in it, but it definitely has a lot of romance and a lot of comedy in it. Yes. And I actually really love the way. Anyway, today we're talking about the Fall Guy. I was going to talk about the way that the romance unfolded in the movie, but we'll hold on to that. So today we're talking about the Fall Guy, which stars Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and it is very loosely based on a TV show of the same name. So, and the TV show was it was, I didn't like it very much. I thought it was really corny. But I had very different feelings about the movie. And I'll talk about some of the Easter eggs that they put in, because this movie was completely targeted to my generation, Generation X. So it was for kids who grew up in the 80s. And it felt very 80s at times, I will say. So, do you want to give the plot synopsis this time?
I need to get my water. 1 second.
By the
Sure.
way, why do you bring your water bottle with you when you go up on the stage after your films are screened?
It's a force of habit. Um,
Has anyone else commented on this?
yeah, of course. All my friends, like, I came up with it. I didn't even I didn't even process. I stopped doing it. I was gonna like because the first time I did it just like because subconsciously I just have to take my water bottle everywhere. What if I get thirsty on stage? And I
Some of those acknowledgments do go on for a really long
yeah,
time.
it literally I got so thirsty one time, and then but the first time was sort of like a accident, but the second time I just thought it was funny, so I just did it again, but then it just felt really awkward, so I didn't do it for the last one. But it's literally a force of habit. I get dehydrated so quick. Anyways, The Fall Guy is a movie about the guy stuntman who's really really great at his job, and he has a horrible accident. Um and he was dating like somebody that he met on set,
A camera
um
operator.
camera operator, cinematographer,
No, she was a
um
camera operator.
camera what whatever. um and after his accident he felt ashamed to try and rekindle that relationship, so um he distanced himself from the business, but then he was brought back because nobody else could do this one job. And he only came back on because the girl he was into was directing. So then that kicks off a whole story about him trying to win her back, and also getting involved in a murder conspiracy
Theory. Some,
theory.
yeah.
But that's sort of the loose plot of the movie, but mainly it's just about him trying to prove himself to his lover,
Yes.
Emily Blunt, Ryan Gosling.
Yes. Yes. His ex-girlfriend, and then who's now got her big directing shot and directing this big sci-fi movie. So, do you want to start and talk about how you felt about the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I walked away like having had a fun experience. Like I think it had so there was a lot of love that was poured into just very specific sections in the movie. Like
Yes.
and I think especially the action scenes and the just like the bombastic um feeling of being able to do anything like that comes through and so like even from the intro I thought the intro was amazing. I thought the um anytime they had really good use of music, and especially popular music.
Hmm.
So anytime like that was kicking in, I was like raring to go. I was like hell yeah. um and I just like the whole parts in between were just so fucking long and drawn out. Like I was more often than not just like waiting for the next cool thing to happen or the next funny joke to be said. But there was just so much meat and padding like in the middle of those moments for me that didn't really that would start to lose me. And especially because, I went to an IMAX theater. This was the second weekend, I guess it came or just the following the opening weekend, but it was like not very full. I thought the IMAX was a little overkill. I mean, the action scenes were cool in that, but like everything else was not. It just felt like unnecessary and I felt like the surround sound was distracting me. But I was also looking, I was just like, I mean, I got to relax in my section. I just like chilled and looked at people seeing if they were enjoying it. And they were older and they seemed to be enjoying it a bit more like, throughout. Um,
I only had two other people. I only had a couple and then one other person, and then both of them were in the same row as me, and the whole
yeah.
other theater was empty. And what was funny is that we were all laughing at the same time and in the same way. They were older
Yeah.
than me, but we were all laughing in the same way,
Yeah.
which was funny. I would just be like, and then I hear the woman to my left going, so it was very funny.
There were some,
It's definitely a movie that should be seen with a bigger audience so that you
yeah.
could kind of laugh together at it.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's a kind of, it's meant to be uproarious comedy in the same way that like in the old days that Beverly Hills Cop was when you'd be watching Eddie Murphy doing these crazy things and the whole theater would be laughing together.
Yeah. And I think there were definitely some moments that lived up to that. I think the unicorn joke was hilarious. I really, despite how much I actually hated like most of the conversation and dialogue scenes, like the one where they're like breaking the fourth wall and making fun of split screens and like doing a split screen
Yeah.
conversation. I thought that
Yeah.
was really funny, especially because Emily Blunt had like the monster hand and she was like tapping her face with it. Um, like there was some pretty great humor sandwiched in between some really just boring like there are conversations between the
I did not find
characters.
it boring.
I know you didn't, but to me the conversation the conversations between the characters sounded like natural. They sounded very natural, but they didn't sound like they were forwarding the story at all. They were just like they it was a lot of I have a pet peeve now with most a lot of dialogue scenes where they like it's just about interrupting each other and like stammering and like just trying to say the next fun trying to force being funny.
So you thought the dialogue was just sort of it didn't advance the plot or anything. There was a lot of interrupting each other. It was inert is the
So
word that you
yeah,
make.
so much I mean so much of what was being said could be communicated in like one beat, like one story beat or one line or like one look. But they just decided to like they just I don't know if it was improv, but I mean, they just felt like they were riffing a little bit, which I didn't think really worked that well. And I didn't think their that everybody's characters were really established that well because I mean, I more resonated with and had fun with them because of who the actors were, and I was familiar with the actors, um, and seeing them together was kind of funny, and they would do their own little funny things, but they weren't doing anything in service of like the story or the characters, so it felt a little disconnected.
That was a specific critique of the New Yorker review.
Yeah,
Yeah, Richard Brody, who really actually liked the film, said that said that he thought the characters were thinly drawn, is how he put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it did work, it worked. Um, I just like I was hyped for so many moments. I just wish the middle wasn't so forgettable. I was like I felt that it came in pretty strong and it left pretty strong, but it just didn't really sustain all the way through. I mean, I'm rambling forever, but what do you think?
Okay. Well, I definitely don't think the movie is a masterpiece. So I don't think that it's a masterpiece on all these different levels. There are issues with it, but overall, I found it an enormously likable movie. It was just so likable. It was just like it was like a golden retriever of a movie. It was and it had so much heart in it and so much good intention and so much funniness in it. And so I'll say one thing, a few things that subverted my expectations. When I saw the first trailer for The Fall Guy, I was really put off by the pairing of Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling. I didn't think that
Yeah,
they
me
worked
too.
together at all. And then but in the actual movie, I thought that they did work together because I thought that they were playing their parts with the same level of sincerity, the
Yeah.
same level of sort of sincerity. And so the feeling, they really made me believe them as a couple that had lost their way,
Mm.
but were essentially delighted in each other for the same reasons. And so I really love that pairing. And then I did not find the in-between parts as inert as you did. And I think that's because for me, relationships are so easily messed up, and they're often messed up by really poor communication issues or when somebody can't bring themselves to say something directly. So most of those dialogue scenes were Ryan Gosling's character, Colt, working himself up to say why he had left her that first time, why he hadn't how he had doubted himself, and therefore he didn't want her to be a part of that. And so it took him so many different tries to get that out. And in between, she kept on trying to give him openings to get that out. And this is an internal dance, not just in movies, but in real life, about people with very different communication skills and very different. And so, in other words, I was sustained by the fact that the love between them was genuinely sincere and very sweet and wholesome. But at the same time, he went through something very dark and very frightening, and he couldn't put his words in the right place to tell her exactly why he had broken up with her, essentially why he had ghosted her, in the worst moment of his life. And so he absolutely thought that she was justified to never give him another chance, but at the same time, he really wanted another chance. And then the last thing I'll say is that this is what I was going to say earlier, is that the romance and the action and the comedy were all woven together very skillfully. So for me, the scene in the split screen was hilarious. And it was hilarious. And I really enjoyed the number of running gags in the movie. So I enjoyed the unicorn. I enjoyed the fact that he was always trying to get coffee. I was always being thwarted about coffee. I enjoyed the fact that the alien costume was always an obstruction in the funniest way possible.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I really love
so
the scene where she beats him up in the costume. It's like
yes.
so funny.
Yes.
It goes really long for no reason too. I think that was good. Yeah.
So, I mean, the alien costume was a joke, as were all the props. And so that the running gags, I by the third time the unicorn appeared, I was actually kind of helpless with laughter.
Mm.
And also because the fact that they used a real unicorn, like they used a real horse, and he was just standing there in random moments. So the comedy part of it really worked, but then I think that the thing that was perfect timing was when he was being repeatedly asked to do that same stunt again and again, where he was set on fire, and she was telling him how she felt through the megaphone, and and there was this like he was being slammed against the rock. The scene was being staged again and again. So that is, by the way, the final thing that I loved about the movie, which is that it is really not just a love letter to an homage to stunt people, but it also is about movie making. It basically says that behind the magic that you see of these of these incredible action sequences. There's so much choreography, there's so much planning, there's so much blocking, and lighting and everything that goes into it. So it really gives you a sense of what the work is, like what backbreaking work it is to do a spectacle like that, a sci-fi action spectacle like that. But at the same time, I never lost sight of the fact that this was about their relationship, and that the entire movie was trying to get them to the point where he could say what had gone wrong.
Yeah.
So I by no means would I this make my top 10 list, but I just found it so likable from start to finish. And I felt so lighthearted after watching it. Really felt lighthearted.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the things you were mentioning about when um the comedic moments and what was drawn out and sort of what running gags were still there. Like I think all those did work. I think they just could have done a bit more cutting down some of the other stuff that doesn't matter as much, like that makes those moments shine. Like honestly, I think the editing of this movie was not great. I think it was definitely great. It was great for the like, the action bits usually. But there were so many things I felt like that you could just lift out and it would be fine. Or like you could uh like also some of the intercutting I didn't really agree with. Like there was the part where he's trying to save the assistant that's captured in the
yeah,
garbage truck.
with the karaoke.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
they keep intercutting with it karaoke. I think that worked when she was singing and like it brought in all that stuff, but they had started the intercutting before that. So
right.
so as he's like doing this really cool thing, he's like following along a garbage truck and he looks fucking awesome. And like there's music going too. It would just like immediately cut back to the conversation between fucking Gail and what's her name again? Kate? I don't
Jody.
Jody, yeah, like Kate and Gail and Jody. And it's like they're just in the karaoke bar talking about, well, he's not here. Like, man, he's not showing up for me. Like, yeah, we got that. We actually just saw that. And
Yeah.
then we could just see you singing and sad and like that works later.
It was a fake out too. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I do think the movie was a little bloated, which speaks to your
Yes.
editing. So it was 2 hours and 5 minutes long, and there's no way that that movie needs to be 2 hours and 5 minutes long. That is like an hour and 40 minutes
Yeah.
max in terms of plot and all the things that happen.
Right.
Like you just didn't need that
You
much.
didn't. And
So
but the thing is I really do love the concept and the story. I had zero clue this was a TV show. So when I saw those extras at the end that came in from the old show, like I realized it was a reference to something I didn't know what it was, so I had to search it up. But it just on the basis of
yes.
like the
Oh, can I
the
mention one thing in
yeah,
relation to
what's up?
that, by the way?
Yeah.
Well, at the end, Lee Majors shows up, who was the star of the TV show.
Yeah.
And so that was like a nod to the fans of the old TV show. And then the other thing that was hilarious, which nobody except anyone from my generation would get, was that at one point there's a sound effect that they use, which is totally from Lee Major's other TV series, The $6 Million Man. So I have to talk a little bit about this because it was so funny. But there's one point where Ryan Gosling lifts something or he has to like wrench something free, and they play the exact same sound effect that they used to indicate that the $6 Million Man was lifting with his bionic arm, or he was
Mhm.
doing something with his bionic capabilities. And what's so funny about that, by the way, what was so funny to me about that is that the $6 Million Man was the coolest TV show for any one of my generation. It was so fucking cool. The idea that this guy, this astronaut, nearly died, and they resurrected him and gave him bionic parts, a bionic arm and bionic legs and a bionic eye. And so it was the coolest thing. And they did all the special effects for that um TV series in ways that you thought that it was so cool, like making that sound. So they made this sound every time he lifted with his bionic arm. And they inserted that sound effect into this movie, which
Yeah.
only those of us from my generation would get.
That's
And
cool.
these days, by the way, those sound effects and special effects would be considered completely outdated and corny.
That
Sorry,
speaks
go on.
to no, that speaks to the nod that this movie makes to filmmaking and like
Yes.
the art of it, the fun of it. Um, I do think like the way, I mean, especially because I'm familiar with how that works. Like, I
Yeah,
do think
yeah.
I do think seeing it was a little like ugh, like because they didn't do it. I didn't think they did it in a fun way.
Hmm.
I think they did it in a way to just show you and be like, wow, stunt people do so much, filmmakers do so much. Especially when they were setting up the cannon, or was it the car rolling on
The
the beach.
cannonball, the cannon roll or something. Yeah.
Cannon roll
It's
is
called,
what they
yeah.
called it. I like that, those little terms, by the way. But they showed them all, like they did this one sweeping shot of Jodie, like, and like her directing everything,
Yeah.
and like trying to make it seem like, okay, she really does this. It's like, I don't know. It felt patty, and I feel like there was a lot just by seeing it. If they were gonna have do that route, I think they could have a bit stronger a bit stronger side characters that would like sort of show that, emotionally.
Yeah.
But I mean,
The
I mean
movie was
that
filled with inside jokes, I will say. Like there were
yeah,
so many inside jokes. So for example, I mean, that that Last of the Mohicans reference, which I
yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
spoil for Dad, is a total inside joke. I mean, that's clearly that lives rent free in the screenwriter's head, and so they just thought it would be funny to stick that in there.
yeah.
I mean, who among us like finds that funny except for people who know and love that film? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all this speaks to something I really love about the movie, which is like the base concept, like this stuntman, theoretically, who can do anything because he's done it all, like in the
Right.
movies.
Right.
I really love the idea that he could just literally do anything physically possible because,
Right.
there's kung fu fighting, they're falling off a cliff, there's like he's just capable of anything. So
And he
the
actually puts it to use in the real world, which is
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
Yes.
And then but the conflict is, what can he not do, basically? Because Ryan Gosling does everything, like everything known to man, which I think is great. Um, do I think it's a little ironic that it's like Ryan Gosling and not like, I don't know, somebody who's like an actual stunt performer, I don't, or does their own stunts? Like I would like, honestly, I don't know. I sort of like that idea because he has stunt performers and he's trying to highlight their work also in the promotion of this movie, but
Yes.
it's also Ryan Gosling, and like they had to get somebody with they had to get a big name or two big names to like really reel in popularity, but I don't know if it really fits with like
The
the
ethos of the
vibe.
film.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think that Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt were absolutely needed to, I mean, I don't think that you make a movie like this with, no names, so to
Yeah, that's
speak,
true.
even though it would be more true that way. The other thing is, there's a lot of talk about this in their reviews, but most people think that they are completely mocking Tom Cruise, because Tom Cruise is always talking about how he does his own stunts. But the interesting thing is, I don't know if that's really mocking because Tom Cruise actually does do his own stunts. Like, it's not like he's lying about it. He is
Yeah.
really proud of the fact that he does his own stunts. He's very, very proud of it. He's proud of the fact that he jumps off of buildings and he flies his own helicopters and he dangles off rock cliffs and whatnot. But there's a direct reference to Tom Cruise in the movie, and then there's this whole mocking of Aaron Taylor Johnson. I always want to Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, who plays this complete douchebag who's always bragging about how he does his own stunts, but he's lying about it, and
Yeah.
so everybody thinks that this film is taking a shot at Tom Cruise.
Mhm.
And I think that's neither here nor there. I will say, in terms of one of the things that I did not like about the movie, but which I'm sitting with it little bit, was that the movie that they were making looked objectively terrible. So,
Oh,
um,
what?
the
That was
movie,
the whole joke.
I know it was a joke, but like, the funny thing
What
about
was
the
in it?
plot,
Was it a metal storm? Yeah.
Metal
J-
Storm, that's right.
Jason
I mean,
Momoa. I thought that
yes,
that was fucking hilarious.
that
They
was,
showed the movie at the end. It does
I
not
mean,
look like something Jodie would direct at all. I don't know what the I don't anyways.
I know. I mean, the thing is that I don't know how I feel about this. It's making a point that's true in that if Jodie messed up this chance, she'd never get another chance again. It is also true that the producer character played by Hannah Waddingham, I'm forgetting her name, her character's name. It is true that she would have had to specifically push Jodie into that role because female directors just don't get enough chances, especially when it comes to action movies. They don't get enough chances. And so they don't get enough chances. They don't get opportunities like that. So it is absolutely true that everything about her future was hanging on it. And so I was thinking, if everything about her future was hanging on this, then why did the movie have to look so objectively terrible? Like the acting was horrible, the plot was horrible, everything was just horrible, you know? And so and actually what it made me think afterwards in terms of how bad that movie looked, like how bad it looked. Like I was thinking I would never want to go see Metal Storm in a theater. And I love sci-fi movies and I love action adventure movies. But I actually for me, it's worse when those types of movies fail because I'm a huge fan of them. And then two, I think that maybe the point of the movie is to show that even if the movie is good or bad, like even if the movie turns out to be like an end game versus a what's a horrible action movie? Um, there's so many horrible action movies. There's like so many bad. I mean, the famous really bad action movie was one that starred Taylor Kitsch, and it was called John Carter. It was a Disney movie
Hmm.
based on a really
Yeah.
famous comic book series, and everybody said that that movie was like pretty unwatchable. Yeah. Oh, and then everybody says that the Zack Snyder movies on Netflix, Rebel Moon, they
Yeah, I
said
heard
that
that
they're
those are
just
bad.
terrible. They also
Yeah.
think that they're a direct ripoff of Star Wars,
Yeah.
like nearly identical
I
to
thought it
Star
was a Star Wars thing before.
Yes. And
It just
so
sounds like a Star Wars thing. Yeah.
yes. So so in other words, it's a little bit heartbreaking for me because those movies are so expensive that it's worse when they fail, you know, when they but then at the same time, I think to myself, well, a movie like this shows how incredibly complicated it is to make movies like that, like big budget action
Yeah.
spectacles, because there are so many moving parts, so many balls in the air, so many things to keep coordinated. Like if anything, I think that that movie, I think The Fall Guy underestimates the complexity of what goes into a set like that, you know? So despite all the tech, the tents and the props and the cars and the cameras and everything like that, I still don't think you get a sense of how crazy difficult it is to put together a movie like that and to shoot a movie like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, with
Metal Storm.
with in traditional fashion with these movies that have some aspect about making movies in them, you have no idea how they were able to finish the movie with everything that
Yes.
happened, like
Yes.
the huge incident, like that's just like that is breaking so many laws.
Yes.
Definitely. But
Yes.
like it, but in the world of the movie, it like works out and everybody's happy. I think it was definitely a joke. Playing at Dune, because it was like a desert world and
Oh
sci-fi and all
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was like very successful because it just looked ridiculous. Like everybody's wearing gold, like
Yes.
everybody, it's all the same color. Like there's no really intention. And of course they recast like with Jason Momoa, who's like a big shot actor, action Aquaman, that was great. I think I think it definitely comments on the the art of making movies and even making movies that are bad. Um, you know, because once you work on movies like that, then you start to lose any sort of uh subjectivity of like, is it good or bad? You just start to think like, well, we worked really hard on it, and this is
Correct.
what we're putting out. So, because it was
That's
like
a really good point. Yeah.
because it seemed intentionally sarcastic and intentionally ironic, I think I accepted it. If it was trying to be if it was trying to be serious, then there's no way that would work.
Yeah, you know
Um,
what? That's a really interesting point, the losing the sense of whether it's good or bad, because so many people worked hard on it regardless. So that actually really supports the main theme of the movie, which is that no matter if a movie is a box office hit or not, no matter if the movie is good or bad or liked by the critics or hated by the critics, there are so many people, especially the stunt people, who have put in their heart and soul into making that movie work, you
yeah,
know? So even though the movie ends up sucking, right, or like looking horrible, there are so many people who put their performance into it, but all the stunt people who put their lives at
yeah,
risk for each one of these movies. Their lives are risked regardless of whether or not, the movie turns out to be any
yeah.
good.
And more often than not, most of these movies that come out that are terrible, like, will usually crush it in like one or two departments, or like more than
That's true.
more than a couple departments. Like every
Yes.
that's so often you hear now. It's like, oh my God, so well designed. I can't believe they made
Right.
that whole thing. Like it looks incredible, but it just is the shit. It is so bad. Like what? So that's sort of I feel like we can transition into like why talking about why this hasn't really kicked off or why this hasn't been a huge hit in theaters.
Yeah.
I think
Wait,
like
one more thing.
yeah,
Wait, one more thing before
yeah,
we transition there, and I'll take you back there, I promise.
yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about Ryan Gosling, who I would never list Ryan Gosling as one of my celebrity crushes. Like I myself don't find him attractive, or he's not sort of a crush
Thanks.
of mine.
Actually,
But
because I was wondering. I mean, I did want to ask you.
well, no, I'm serious. But anyway, but I want to make this point, which is for a long time, he's been going back and forth throughout his entire career between movies where he is a romantic lead, like The Notebook or Crazy Stupid Love, or movies where he is just being weird, like Lars and the Real Girl, like smaller parts, or more torture parts. I mean, torture parts are like Drive, Place Beyond the Pines, and then Blue Valentine, which is one of his really more notable dramatic roles. What I think, I am just finding him again not a crush, but again I just find him so endearing. I find him so endearing both in interviews and in his roles. Like I found him endearing as Ken in terms of how sincerely he committed to the role. But there is this scene in The Fall Guy, which I just sticks in my mind where she's trying to talk to him and she's trying to stay calm. Emily Blunt is trying to stay calm, but the wind is blowing her hat around. So then she puts her hat back on her head and then he reaches over and he tightens up the hat so that the bead is right underneath her
Yeah,
chin. And that moment to me, I don't know if it was scripted, it probably was scripted, but he just executed it with such incredible sweetness and
yeah.
sincerity. And I thought that is what I love so much about Ryan Gosling, is that there is this essential like sweetness and earnestness that comes through. It reminds me very much of like whenever I had a crumb of something on my face, like your dad when we were dating would just reach over and just like quietly remove the crumb without even commenting on it. It's not like he would even say you have something on your face. He would just go over and like flip it away. And that to me is just the most tender, caring gesture when they feel like they're familiar enough to do that for you. They don't have to ask. They're not invading your space. So they're performing this small little service, but at the same time, they're doing it with such love. So I just wanted to say that about Ryan Gosling. I think he's on a roll. I think that my favorite performance of his is still Lars and the Real Girl. So out of all, and I have seen him in a lot of freaking movies.
Yeah.
I've seen Ryan Gosling in, I think probably second performance is Crazy Stupid Love. So, okay, go.
I think no well no I think his praise is earned. I think like he's
Yeah.
super entertaining. I love watching him in most of what I've seen him in. I thought he was sort of uh uh in both Blade Runner and Lars and the Real Girl. I or not real Lars and the Real Girl. Drive. I thought that
Mm.
he was sort of like basic, like he didn't like give that much, I feel like. And that's sort of what I'm worried about with some of his performances. Like I'm not sure I know Lars and the Real Girl, that takes a lot of effort. Like that's like so much um that's he really I thought was really great in that. But a lot of these other roles I'm like how much effort is he really I mean how much does
His
it matter?
restraint is not working for you.
His restraint. No, I just like don't I don't know how much about the craft of acting is really put forward with some of his characters because it's just sort of him and he's like likable, you know. Um I don't like I don't want to disrespect what he does. I don't think I highly doubt he, you know, doesn't put effort into stuff, but it just seems like it comes off like a little basic. And so that's why it sort of bothers me sometimes when when I will read, you know, when I watch the Oscars or I'll see stuff about Ken and or I'll see this movie, look at reviews, and all the reviews are like, "Oh my God, I love Ryan Gosling. I love Ryan Gosling. He's so good, so good, so good." But you know, I thought that Emily Blunt brought the same amount of energy and love to this role. So like, I
Yeah,
don't
she was
know,
very good. She
I
was
don't know
really,
why
really good.
I don't know why she's not as highlighted as much as Ryan Gosling, who also doesn't, you know, I don't know. These roles seem like simple, you know. It's like him just like kind of
I don't think think that they
Good
are
thing.
simple. Disagree with you a little bit because I don't think that they are simple. I think he manages to make fully realized characters where often there is none, or it's really his conception or his idea of what the character ought to
Right.
be, you know? So I don't think that they're simple. The other thing that's interesting to me is that, you say that he gets all the attention. He actually is fairly he doesn't campaign the same way that other people did. So he was nominated for La La Land, but it was Emma Stone who won the Oscar. And so very few people talked about his performance in La La Land because everybody, all eyes were on Emma Stone because she was campaigning so hard for that film. He's been tapped to be the sexiest man alive by People magazine several times, and every time he's turned it down, he's made it clear that he's just not interested in it. So he's not interested. He's very good at playing the Hollywood game when it's part of his job, like to promote films. But when he gets called out for his performances in a sort of hyperbolic way, like what he did with Ken, for example,
Mm.
when he gets called out, I think that he's benefiting from this collective love that people have from him for him, which Ryan Gosling, the actor, and Ryan Gosling, the person, which is actually quite similar to the collective love that people now have for Keanu Reeves. Like people have this
Yeah.
collective love for Keanu Reeves, and so Keanu Reeves ain't never going to get nominated for anything, and Ryan Gosling is a type. But when Leonardo DiCaprio wanted an Oscar, he campaigned so hard each and every time. Like when he wanted an Oscar for The Revenant, he campaigned like crazy, and he hates publicity. He hates doing it. He hates even doing it when it's his job. And everybody knows this about Leonardo DiCaprio, so everybody was actually pleased by the fact that he put his own ego aside to campaign for Lily Gladstone, within Killers of the Flower Moon. So that's what I will say about Ryan Gosling is that I think he benefits from a collective love, and I also think he hates that whole "hey girl" thing that came up. I mean, this is a man who at one point he was part of the "hey girl" meme. Everybody kept on doing hey girl" as Ryan Gosling. And so
Okay.
there were pillows and sheets and t-shirts all embroidered with "Hey girl" and his face.
Yeah.
And I think he hates that side of him. I think he hates that side of fame. Anyway. All right, so let's transition to why this movie didn't do so well. Why do you think it didn't do so well? By
I
the way,
mean,
I think it's going to be a big hit on streaming.
yeah. Yeah, it's more of a streaming movie. It's just not a movie where you have to tell somebody like you got to go see this.
Correct.
And now that there's a lot of movies, there's a good amount of movies coming out where it's like we got to go see that. Fall
Right.
Guy was never one of those. Um, and I don't, the trailer when I watched it wasn't. I was like, that seems like it's going to be okay. It might be a little
Yeah.
fun.
I thought the trailer
Um,
was terrible, actually.
Yeah. And then it was pretty fun. Yeah, that's it. But it's not something after watching I'd go like, "Hey, you got to go see that." I mean, I even feel hesitant about if somebody were to ask me if I would tell them to go see it. Like it's because it's something I can personally enjoy. I put it in a category of fun movies that are not like that are not perfect. Like the movies that I give 3 stars and a like. So like Pacific Rim or Real Steel. These are movies that I like. I like the concept so much and I like aspects about it, but it could have just been better. Yeah, and that those types of movies are perfect for streaming. It's not something I'm like gonna go see in the theater. But again, I think it's the age group thing that, nobody knows this show. I don't fucking I didn't hear about it. So and as much as they're trying to put like a campaign for raising visibility for stunt workers, um I would have almost preferred they just like made a really good movie and then that would kind of come with it instead of that being like the defining feature of the film.
Yes, I think they leaned too hard into that aspect, and I think they did it with the best of intentions.
Yeah.
But I think that they lean too hard into that aspect because I don't think that people will go see movies that are marketed as a love letter to stunt people because that will automatically make them think, oh, the story must not be that great. you know?
Yes, yes.
So I think that they definitely made some stumbles in marketing, and I think they did it with the purest of intentions, you know? And it's just figuring out what you need to market a movie and to get people to go see it. Um, is a really tricky thing, you know? And then the second thing I will say is that I definitely think that this movie is built for streaming. I think it's going to find an audience once it gets on a streaming platform. Argyle is finding a huge audience on Apple TV of all places, which Apple TV does no promotion whatsoever whenever it picks up its, hits.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Apple is like it's one of the stingiest when it comes to promoting what its new offerings are. But I think all the streaming platforms don't invest very much in promotion. They just kind of hope that you'll find which of your movies have gotten there. The reason why I find this interesting is because Netflix, had added Equalizer 3, and for the longest time it was reigning in the top 10. They just a couple weeks ago added the first Equalizer, and it has been holding steady at like number 1 or number 3 for the past few weeks since they added it. And I think that that's because some movies take a long time to find their right audience if
Yeah.
they're not marketed in the right way to begin with. I don't think that The Fall Guy was ever meant to be a summer blockbuster for sure, and it definitely wasn't meant to have it does not have crossover appeal. It's almost like it was designed for older people like me, you know?
Yeah.
So like what's going to get people of your generation to go see The Fall Guy? It's not Ryan Gosling. It's not like Emily Blunt. Those are all people who are sort of more, my generation or millennials, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there's absolutely nothing in this movie that would appeal to Generation Z or Alpha generation. Nothing, you know? And so what do you do then? Like, how do you market it? I think that you basically market it as a rom-com, like as a niche audience. The idea of you the idea of you did not even get whatchamacallit, a theatrical release.
Yeah.
I think it was only released on Prime Video, if I'm not mistaken. If it did get a theatrical release, it was very, very limited.
Yeah.
So, in other words, not meant for streaming, really seems suited for streaming. I think it will find its audience eventually. I wish that people would not talk about it as this big box office disappointment because I actually think it was set up to not succeed at box office. Like I
Mm.
don't think it was not a summer tentpole movie at all. I will say the one thing that argued for its widespread theatrical release was the fact that it got such glowing reviews. So it debuted at South by Southwest, as did The Idea of You. Both of those premiered at that film. And South by Southwest never used to be known as a film festival, but the early reviews coming out of the festival were huge. Like they were very popular. So you had all the major reviewers saying that this movie's a goddamn delight,
Yeah.
and its Rotten Tomato score is really pretty high,
Yeah.
and I would argue, by the way, that it's better than Real Steel. And it is better than what's the other movie you mentioned? Real Steel and
Pacific Rim.
Pacific. Oh yeah, it is at least 1.5 stars better than those movies. Both of those movies were kind of objectively bad, and I don't think that The Fall Guy is objectively bad.
I just didn't
I would
I'm
strenuously disagree with you.
I am left with the feeling in the middle of that movie just sitting I was sitting in my chair like this like okay, can we just go to the next thing? Like how much does a movie make me do that? That sort of has a very big imprint on my experience of it. But like I almost
You're
they
cynical about love.
yeah. No.
You're
There was
cynical about movie making.
there was they put a little bit too much money, I think, into this one. Like
Mm,
if they
hmm.
condensed it a little bit, they didn't have to have everything. I think they maybe were worried that like they wouldn't get another chance to like do this again, maybe. Or at least not for a while. But if they can made it more condensed, and you're left with like just those quick those moments that stand out because so many moments stand out for me, but so much of the movies I just have forgotten about, like, or I don't care about. So if they condensed that and then it did really well, and then they had enough for like a sequel, then a sequel, and then the sequel maybe could have like an actual good villain because the villain in this or yeah, the villain in this was so gimmicky. It was like this actor who's like off somewhere. We're trying to find him, but actually he's the villain, and like they lost me a little bit with that. If I they probably just couldn't afford like another triple A, actor. Uh,
Aaron Taylor Johnson is actually a big deal.
I know he is, but they didn't do anything with him.
He's supposedly the front runner to be the next James Bond.
Yeah, and he's gonna be Craven. I think he's okay.
I think he's okay too.
He's
He
sort
was
of
also in
okay.
Godzilla. He was in the first Godzilla movie.
Yeah, and he's played such a blank slate, soldier.
Yeah.
Um, but like,
Wait,
yeah,
he's
they
going to be Craven. Did Craven not come out yet?
no.
Oh, that to me, that character is utterly forgettable.
Craven was in the new Spider-Man game, which was
Oh,
pretty
really?
good. Pretty good, but he's like a very bulky, like husk of a man, like instead of like I don't know, he seems a little torpy to me sometimes. I mean, especially with the how he was in this movie too. He was a bit of a hack. I really loved when he said though, like this guy's the best stunt guy I've ever worked with. Like no matter what's happening, like that's what happened. And and Gail was like a revealed villain, and I mean, I hated any scene with her. Honestly, she was sort of uh her conversations were a little annoying. But anyways, it could have been like it could have set up for a sequel pretty nicely, but I don't think that's coming. And I think it's because they were trying to do too much, I feel like.
I think
Yeah.
that Donovan Leitch, the director of the film, I think that he struggles sometimes with consistent tone, like really committing
Yeah.
to a tone. So I may be alone in this. I think Atomic Blonde was great, and I loved both. I don't know why people had problems understanding the plot. I did not have any problems understanding the plot. But again, Blonde was set at such a specific time period. It was, the 80s and it was the fall of the Iron Curtain, and so that's such a specific moment in history and of the Cold War that, again, it was much more likely to appeal to people who actually lived through that cultural moment as a cultural experience. And so I think that Donovan Leitch, I think that the tonal elements that he aims for are sometimes like I don't think the Fall Guy stuck to any particular tone other than sort of nostalgic, you know what I mean? Like um it wasn't particularly consistent in establishing a world and a time and a place and a time period. It was just kind of anonymous.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was kind of thinking of I was kind of thinking of directors who manage to find audiences no matter what the references are, no matter how dated the references are or how old they are. So for example, like for whatever reason, George Miller keeps on finding an audience. People are hyped for Furiosa. They were hyped for Fury Road, and he's still finding new generations of fanboys. And I think it's because George Miller has such a specific and dedicated aesthetic, and a way that he puts together set pieces and a commitment to his spectacle that I think that generations respect. But I don't think that the Fall Guy achieved those heights anywhere near those heights. I think it was just a really nice romance with some action set pieces, and it lost its audience members like you along the way. I liked it very much. I liked it a full, I think, star more than you did. But I liked it very much, but at the same time, I can see its flaws.
Yeah.
But it was a really enjoyable movie watching experience. And I so appreciate that these days, as you know. I appreciated that in the idea of you as well. And so I'm just lately just appreciating movies that feel just like movies, like, oh, this is why, it was the whole idea of, in the old days of people going to the Saturday afternoon matinee and getting super excited about a cowboy, Western movie or whatever. Like it's that experience of just wanting to be transported and taken away by a story. And
Yeah.
so I just, the other thing I'll just say is that I really enjoy spending time with people who I find interesting. It's why I reread books all the time. And I really enjoy spending time with Ryan Gosling and his characters. I just do. I think that they're hilarious. I just think he's really unusually quirky. And I think that he tries to work against his perceived handsomeness. I don't find him handsome, but a lot of people do.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great way of putting it.
yeah.
Yeah, and I've been bashing on it basically this whole time, but I really did. I had such fun with the parts I liked, and uh I was still I mean, it's so dope. Like they were fighting over a sound mixer. Like how many movies like do that and make it entertaining?
Yes.
Um, and then once he got it, like, and he fell, oh, so cool. I thought like, and the music, I added a couple songs, like maybe like three songs from this movie, like to my
Oh,
playlist,
really?
and yeah, some really good rock songs, and um, it's just like so the way he falls too. It's just like he's done this a million times, and it's dope. I definitely enjoyed it, and I got home and I parallel parked, and I was like, yeah, I did that. I can do anything. So, hey, how many movies make me feel like that nowadays? That's why I give it a like too.
Yes. Um, all right. So thank you, everyone. Again, all of our listeners who tune in for this one. I hope that more of you go to see it. I actually have a feeling that not many people will see this episode because they're not interested in the movie. So I had a friend reach out to me after the idea of you and say, "Oh my God, I read the book. I really like the book. I have to watch your episode." So,
That's nice.
anyway, this was again 18, episode 18.
Yeah.
And then next time maybe we'll do all the Spider-Mans. Um, a tier list maybe of all the Spider-Mans.
Yeah, sure. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I'd really like to do that.
I've missed Amazing Spider-Man, but I wasn't really upset about that.
Which one?
The first Andrew Garfield one. I think the second one's coming out like now.
Oh, but you've seen them.
I haven't seen the second Andrew Garfield, but I've seen all the Tobey Maguire, I've seen all the Tom Holland, and those are the only ones they're releasing.
Okay. All right. So, I will see you in a few days. Although by the time people see that, you should wait to post this episode until after you graduate. So I will also say for the benefit of any of our listeners that we are heading into Eric's college graduation, and it's so exciting. So 4 years, and going and graduating with a real job in the film industry, which is exciting. So I can't wait to see you in a couple days. But in the meantime, this, podcast has been a damn delight, to do with you during your last year of college. And I hope we continue it, ad infinitum. So
Agree. I love you very much. Thank
I
you.
love you too. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.